Hey folks, welcome to another edition of Turning Techies into Leaders. Today I'm joined by Gil Machado, who is the head of data foundations at SellerX. Jill and I had known each other for a couple of years actually. We were at Wonderflats together and have kind of stayed in touch since then. So, how are you, Jill?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've always admired about you from the first day that we met, I remember starting the new job at Wonderflats and, have our first one-on-one. I'm stuck in a COVID lockdown hotel room, and the first thing I walked away from that call was, "Oh my God, this guy gets the business understanding. He's not just an engineer. He seems to understand everything we're going to do with this and how we're going to use it and all that stuff." So that's always been something that I've noticed from you. How did you develop that? Like, how did you pick up that skill set?
Uh, well, good question. I mean, I don't know if there's an actual recipe on how to do that or if it's more of a natural skill that maybe I always had. But since my first job, I always cared a lot about why I was doing whatever I was doing.
Okay.
So whenever I got a task from a colleague or from my manager or from a stakeholder or whoever, I always try to understand exactly why they're asking what they're asking and what is the business purpose of it.
Hmm.
And and then like it's really important for me to know exactly what kind of value I'm adding with that task. And I guess yeah, just gradually this it was something that I developed and something that I always tried to really keep in mind. For me, like when I compared myself to some engineers or more technical people that I worked with, I knew that I wasn't the most brilliant one in terms of technical skills. Um, but I always tried to be one of the best at talking to people outside of the tech teams. And because I knew that it could be something that helped differentiate me from other people. And yeah, just something that I always try to keep in mind.
You started off with like the understanding of the why. I mean, obviously for a lot of people that's important in their day-to-day lives, but like how do you get the why out of somebody? Like especially early on as an engineer, you're ingesting data really early in the phase. Like how do you get the why and the ultimate output? It could touch five people before it goes anywhere. So how do you get
Mhm.
that why?
So I try to challenge people and challenge the requests. A lot of times I've seen, especially in data teams, I've seen people work in a way that they kind of let the stakeholders lead the
Hmm.
solution and even define what the solution should look like. And I think that happens because we're stuck in this mode of just following instructions.
Service provider, right?
Yeah, exactly. Um, Whereas I think we as the technical people and especially data teams, we usually have a more holistic perspective of
Hmm.
the data products or the tables or the reports or whatever it is that exists. And we should really challenge the instructions that were being given by the stakeholders and really um, try to understand if what we are creating for them is something that's going to be bringing value in the long term and something that is worth our time.
Hmm.
So this is like partially answering your question, but um, as to how I understand the why of what they're doing, yeah, I just ask questions about their own jobs, about their perspective that they have on the business, because that's the part that I don't know, right? I don't
Hmm.
know exactly where they're coming from and how they got to the questions that they're asking me. So I really try to understand what that team is doing. How is this going to add value for them? And
Hmm.
then with my perspective, that maybe is more of a bird's view because I also deal with stakeholders from other teams, and I try to tie what I'm being requested to do with what other teams have requested
Yeah.
from me, and see like can we reuse something that we built before? can I use what you're asking me to build long term for other purposes? And yeah, I really try to tie things together
Yeah.
and not just like put out that specific fire and move on to the next, you know.
Yeah. I think you just touched on something that I think is really important in data teams and obviously in your instance, which is like we're getting requests from four, five, six, 10 different stakeholder groups, and oftentimes there's overlap between those two things, right? So I think it is part of our responsibility to did you talk to each other? Should we put each other into a room together? Hey, if you're asking this and you're asking this, are we trying to get to this third thing? And should we just invest in that instead of building these two things separately apart from each other, right? So I think there's often that, we could
That
easily
happens,
be.
yeah, that happens all the time. And especially like again, my perspective is mostly about uh projects that the data team does. Yeah, I see that happening all the time.
Mm,
It's very common that you start developing these silos in the company, and then you have people that spend a really big amount of time getting to some numbers or building some data products, and there was someone else two tables away, but nowadays not tables, but on a
mhm.
different team, spending also a huge amount
Doing
trying
the
to build the
exact same
same
thing.
thing. And they just didn't know about each other.
Yeah.
So this happens a lot, and with a lot of different team structures, this can be more common when the data analysts are embedded in each business domain, and there's not a centralized data team that is in touch with each other like on a daily basis or very regularly. And obviously that team structure has its own virtues as well. But not to say that I defend a more centralized structure or not. But it's just
Mhm.
one of the things that you should be on the lookout for when you're working like that.
If we, go back to this idea that you touched on a little bit about uh, quick and dirty versus long lasting. You mentioned something earlier about having something that's going to be a legacy or stand the test of time. How do you differentiate that, especially in a data foundation perspective? You want everything to be perfect on the back end, but how do you split? Because I think that's always been something you've been good at is like, hey, here's a quick and dirty, but it's still going to help us in the long run because we'll be able to take it forward from there. So how do you figure that out and what do you do there?
Yeah, so my team specifically was created exactly to address this problem. That's actually why we went to this with this name of Data Foundation, because what we aimed for was really to create data assets that could be reusable in a
Mhm,
long time. And what we try to do is really understand the needs that the different departments had and try to think in in a more high level. What are the things that our data warehouse should have? What are the critical sources, the tables and the data marts that are really going to be important for everyone? And and then the whole architecture that we implemented was always around this idea. We
mhm,
are not going to be building things to answer a single question that appeared. We're always going to be having the mindset of building something that can be useful 3 months or 3 years from now, ideally. And in SellerX, this made a lot of sense because they were working in the complete opposite way. So I saw quite quickly that this was one of the main issues that we had to address. We
mhm,
had so many duplication in terms of pipelines, in terms of tables, in terms of reports.
mhm,
I was seeing the same KPIs being calculated 20 different times with small variations between them. So it was really important to change the whole mindset of the team, and also to change drastically the way we were taking the requests from stakeholders, because we were basically allowing the stakeholders to just steer the solution. And every time a new request would pop up, we would create a new pipeline and a new table for it. And I mean, it was just something that I didn't see as being sustainable long term.
mhm.
And obviously, you want to also remain
flexible and quick to answer questions that come. Like if it is with an ad hoc query, so be it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you are an engineering team, and especially the people that I work with are data engineers and analytics engineers mostly, you cannot just be um, answering people's requests
Hmm.
like for that specific thing. You need to really think in a more holistic view, and yeah, so that's what I try to do right away.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think so. A lot of people often struggle with that because it's easy just to be, oh, you need that, and here you go, and here's immediate value, right? And I think what you're saying is like this is the instant gratification that I can provide you, and I can be seen to be a team player and a great person, or I can actually say no and focus on building a long-term, scalable, reusable source
Hmm.
that will remove all of those requests in the futures. And so I think there's an element there where I think people well, I'd love to get your thoughts on like how do you have that hard conversation with this someone who's like, I need this today, and you're like, actually, no, it's going to take us 2 weeks, but we're going to build it right, and you're never going to have to ask us that question again.
Yeah.
Like there's that trade-off. How do you handle those conversations?
Yeah, it was tricky in the beginning. So people obviously respond to incentives, right? In the beginning, there was a lot of emphasis on speed,
Hmm.
and the way that I think most of the team members were being evaluated or somehow rewarded was on how quickly they were
Yeah.
delivering things.
Yeah, you get rewarded on are you available when I need you and how fast did you give it to me? And then you get the good job, right? The pat on the back.
Exactly. And oh, you are so fast at doing
Yeah.
this. You're great. And I mean, obviously that's important, but it cannot be the sole metric that you're using to assess how someone is working. And one thing, and again, this is a concept that sometimes it's more difficult for people that are less technical,
Hmm.
but for the people in my team, I saw that they have the technical skills to understand what I wanted to convey. And the idea was we always need to keep in mind how much technical depth are we creating and how hard are we making our lives in the long term. If we are just creating more and more pipelines and more tables and more jobs, and we eventually are creating so much stuff to maintain that we are becoming, in the long run, we're becoming a support team. All we're doing is maintenance work, because a lot of the things we build, it's not just build and forget.
Hmm.
If they're good, people are going to keep using them, and whenever they there's a problem with the stuff we create, someone's going to need to fix it.
Absolutely.
So I try to really pass on this message that we are, if a task it can be done in a quick and dirty way, it takes 1 day, or it can be done really well, it takes 2 days. Yeah, we're it's there's more upfront investment of 1 day, but over a year, maybe we might be saving 5, 6, ten
Mhm.
days, right? Because there's gonna be less maintenance work to be done.
Yeah. I mean, there's those stats, right, that show that if you make a change and it's not documented, it's even 10 days after you built it, the amount it take it 10x the amount of time it takes to go back and remember what you did, what the context was, what the lot like the code was. Like there's a significant gain in doing it all in one hit than there is to piece it out over multiple installments.
Definitely, definitely. And I mean, whatever we built, I read something on Twitter not too long ago. Um, Code that you wrote last week is already legacy code.
Yeah, well,
So
it's
like
legacy code as soon as you
it's
press
already something that you'll need to maintain, and it will be a headache if there's no processes, no documentation, no standardized approach to how you build things, how you deploy things. So
so
I think it's really important to always have this in mind.
the example you gave, I think, is I mean, that's if I was thinking about it, it's simple, right? You said 1 day, 2 days, but like there's some times where it's like 1 week, 3 months. That's a harder trade-off, right, for the business. So how do you approach that message? Because that's, hey, I can give, cost $40,000, 3 months. I can do it in a week, $3,000, whatever the salary, give or take.
Yeah. No, it's super important to also remain a little flexible. Um, I'm all about best practices and doing things in a systematic and structured
Mhm.
way. But at the same time, I understand what is the business perspective and what is the perspective from a non-technical team that asks stuff from our team, and they need to see results.
Yeah.
So it's always a constant balance and the search for the perfect trade-off between delivering visible business value and
Mhm.
keeping things running smoothly from the technical standpoint.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's no silver bullet. Obviously, you need to understand exactly um, the context in which things are being requested, how urgent it is for the business, and how painful it is going to be for our team if we do things wrong.
Mhm.
Um, and you gotta weigh in all of these things together and then make a decision. In the example that you just mentioned, um, it might really be worth going with the 1 week and doing the quick and dirty solution
Mhm.
if the alternative is 3 months, right? So, but again, it always depends case by case, and
Yeah.
there's a
I mean,
lot of
as you
things
mentioned, it
to
depends. Like
consider.
if all of a sudden every time it breaks, it takes a week to fix it, then before you know it, you get your 12 weeks pretty quick. Or if you're going to use this thing for 10 years, I mean, but I mean, sometimes that's hard to know. No, that's a valid point. We talked a lot about context and business understanding and the things in the examples you've given. Do you think you'd be where you are without having had that foundation in the past? Like, do you think that's actually helped you drive your career above and beyond your technical skills?
Well, I think so. I think it's been really important. Maybe I was also lucky because I worked with a lot of people that I was fortunate enough to learn a lot from. And I've worked with people that were amazing from the technical perspective, and I've worked with managers and team leaders that clearly didn't shine from the technical standpoint, but they were so good at just bringing people together, understanding the long-term vision of the team and the company, and at the same time being assertive when it comes to making decisions. And and I try to always pick a little bit from everyone that I work with. And as a technical person that always aspired to be more than just an individual contributor, I knew that those soft skills were something that I had to keep developing.
Mhm.
And I mean, more and more I believe that you need to have them. There was maybe a time when um, there was this idea that you could be as an engineer and just know how to code and be really strong in that, and you would make an amazing career. Maybe you can still do it that way,
Can, but you're limited. Yeah, for sure.
but I always think you're always going to be limited, right?
And even if you want to be an individual contributor, like understanding context, business, the impact, I think those help you make a better product ultimately, which is what their goal is, right? Whether you manage people or not,
Exactly.
ultimately you're trying to generate impact and value. So
Exactly. Because a lot of the things we build, I mean, there are types of tasks that are really purely technical,
sure.
but yeah, it's as you're saying. I would say more than 50%, even if you're doing something very specific and very technical, they do have some sort of overlap with the business vision that the company has. And if you understand that vision, ultimately you're going to be building something better.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up, is there anything that we haven't talked about today that you might want to bring up?
Um, no, I would say there was a particular learning that I got, which I think is pretty important. As a transition, I
Mhm.
transitioned to a more of a leadership position, which was really understanding the people that you work with. And if I had to define myself as um, a tech lead or whatever it is that I'm currently doing, I wouldn't say exactly that I'm one way or another. I
Mhm.
would say the thing I try to do the most is really understand um, the individual characteristics of the team members
Hmm.
and see really how to handle each one and how to get the most out of them. Um, in my team, for example, I have people that work in very different ways, and my approach with them is can be very different. And and so I think one of the biggest skills that someone that's working with other people and more of in a management position can have is really understanding their differences and not try with and going with that approach of this is why I'm as a leader, you have to adapt to me,
Hmm.
and this is how it's going to be. I think it always needs to be the other way around. Like you understand the person and you try to see what resonates more with them and how to motivate them to do their best work. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was for me one of the things that um, I had a different idea when I started in this position, and then that was one of the things that over time I
Yeah.
started changing.
No, you hit something that I'm passionate about there. Like I'm a translator for the business, but I'm an emulator for the people. So basically anybody can plug and play into the organization system and I have to adapt to how do I get the most out of them? How do I get them to develop? How to get them to grow? And then my job is to translate requirements from business to tech and tech to business. And so like there's an element there for sure. Like it's crazy how that role is as you become further up in your career, that's what it ends up being. So, great stuff. Thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate your insights. Were really awesome and helpful, hopefully for many people that will listen to this. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great.